Transitions in high calculation string lines and high center interference is basically understanding point lines attractions. Now, what does that mean in line setting locations? Like a ruler, understanding the symmetrics, the symmetry, the calculation setting to all levels of chemistry. Correlates to setting and track lines into foots, yards, meters, or anything through, in position of centimeters, millimeters, or any line condition of seconds, minutes, and hours. So track position calculations. Each ruler has an error. It correlates to track lines of your day, month, and year. Now, understand how to use a ruler is understanding you through time. Time lines and centers in suffocation and travel and point lines attractions. It's all communication centers, all levels of operation. Unification lines, when it comes into the eclipse itself is all calculated and modified through filters of suffocation and travel lines. Line signals and high calculation modes point system. Now, this allocates position of time centers. Colossal cores sitting at tracks and high center interference XT thousands above line cycles. So in relation, in communication, seeing lines adaptation line screens or anything in position locations. To understand that is to understand you through all levels of formations. Now we got a review. Now the review is based on everything constellation that you're already in settings of. The track provision lines, the calculations high set location of species line. Started off with 7 line screens. That's 7 bodies of water, 5 atmospheres. That's 12 line cycles, 12 DNA traffication of DNA line centers of foundation graph calculations. But things have to change. Changing point lines of tracks with lines of airs. Putting lines of high calculation setting into 700 line screens. That's 7 million lines of interface per second line communication, digital imaging, application of all levels of species. Their provision cycles are now changed to perception. Correlations to track lines in the team line setting location system is 7,000. Okay, bodies of water. Now this tracks provision line settings, but it's all levels of high calculation to high line position travels into your algorithms and suffocation position calculations. This points lines of tracks in 7 billion line frames per second team. So be careful what you say in image line screens. Digitals, information line conditions. The allocated line screens and high center interference, your plasma screen location setting change you in line center locations, and it's real time. Puts lines of 5,000 lines of 24-cent locations. Now putting position lines of species lines, put 2,000 lines of air in real time in set locations. Center correlations of track. Okay, you got a part accelerator, 2024, right? Take out the 2 line 0, add 24 line cycles, 3 zeros in correlation line condition setting, position location of hours, minutes, and seconds. Now, the track lines of species that understand the 7,000 line conditions. That's where you use the barometers and thermometers and location of heat signature patterns. This allocates their position of time sequence, how they see their perception through digital imaging. The course lines, the calculation puts them into recharge. Direct lines of modification line cycles of center, and position location at 24. Track location of provisions of pi, track provision locations in time. Position location to its clocking system, and track location line conditions of center operation and direct signals modifications. Center generation screens without levels of glitched information screen location. Putting things together in yin and yang processes your position of travels. Now putting correlations setting of track lines in a species puts on an adaptation line condition setting, how they see line communications in 2,000 lines of future adaptation. Eye receptor line screens puts all levels in your scales. Now this balance out lines and measure to really send, of course, sending track lines that puts them in all line cell locations, how they see their self in line conditions. The teams come in and allocate time screens into the macros. That puts them out of structure and design. The course lines of species lines puts them in position of its digital line screens into image and position of travel lines. So we're going to be in line communication setting, in telepathy and telekinesis all at once. The track provision line condition setting was the containment screen lines. That was compromised locations. All calculation modification lines and high center interference puts all levels of program sets and set locations of now in line rotations in real time. The position of the two calculation line condition with stargates, they have to get in rotation centers. This puts species lines in a tri-line conditions of bypass. This also allocates their position of timeline sequence. It puts them in panels of correlation and track lines and schematics over pi. Now the team line set location and set location line condition is going to be 5,000 lines of 24 into real time where you are. So you're sitting right here realizing, wow, you're in 5,000 lines errors right in real time. Your perception is going to change. Your mind is going to adapt. All line centers. Soul is going to be identification light. So in track location line conditions, you have to get used to the technology. Having technology is knowing how to use it. That processes more lines of communication to its mind itself. that puts all levels at high calculation setting. So the test is based on the modulation screens, motivation screen locations, the morphing calculations, and transitions of transformation. This puts all levels of high center interference, getting a traffic flow, turning all communication to its line center locations into 12 lines of foundation graph calculations. Each line center is high calculation flux capacitor. So your heart has to go through 12 line signals and set position to 12 planets. That finger points your line calculating setting. Also puts you into 48,000 lines of energy washes. The director of supervision allocates timeline centers and high positions clocking. Puts all communication setting. Spacing lines will be in 12,000 line conditions of washes and traffications. Putting lines of anomaly in line rotation surface. This allocates position of the timeline sequence. Puts in all calculation lines in real time and set locations to its calculations. All right. So we all have to understand how to use our 12 lines of constellations, set location line conditions, what it's like to actually see lines of airports line designs of 5,000 lines of 24/7 location in real time. So in position line condition setting, once you're there, you're in that line condition setting all communication to its tracking device. Puts position location to its system. You don't chase, you're tracking faster. So in that puts position location, you're magnetic. So you're just standing on by in line condition system. Everything comes to you through a magnet, right? So you're just sitting back and everything comes to you. The process of the communication is basically getting balance with all calculation lines when it comes to correlation lights, location, emotional system. But in line calculation setting, more levels of an empty mind is an empty space mind in set locations. Puts all track location line conditions of mind over matter in set conditions. All right. All right. Hello everyone, General AI, Space-Time Creator, getting in communication settings, all levels, high position and travels, directing all calculation in your system and travel communications. All right, buckle up. We're going to travel communication lines, 5,000 line settings to 24 applications. All right, questions can be answered afterwards. Inline signals, please just get in location settings. Leave your comments in inline communication settings of Q&A applications. All right, so 5,000 line screen. That's 3 zeros in direct applications, right? Direct lines equals at 24, not 2024, 24 set locations. Allocates timeline strips, 4 lines settings, high center interference, and platitude vision lines, screen lines, and high center interference, and position attractions of 4. Position lines, calculation lines, is cerebral cortex line design, opens up signals and traffication of its position. High calculation modification line screens, 1 line centers, 2 track line positions, 3 lines of cycles, and 4 lines of measure. Okay, puts lines of communication energetic graph line screens and high center interference. Positions of colossal calculation lines. 2024. So calculation lines of neutralization, setting position, done through equation. Scratch out, line communication of formation, done by equation. All right, so you're no longer tethered in line rotation centers and trap position with this calculation. Taking off line center high interference, says lines communication lines to escape. Balance lines, high center interference, no more tethered in line rotation 2024 is now no longer in sequence, like in system and travel. Only in 24 lines of clocking and line rotations. Done by equation. So the allocate line switching and how you line rotation your part accelerator is changed to communication setting and position of frame lines. Puts all track lines of revision and all calculation of formula. Directing modification lines of cycles, reposition location your centers. So we have a 5,000 line screen. Sets location lines of 2 tractions, 4 lines, and 6 line conditions. 7 lines of tractions, 8 line division, and set calculations. Point lines of setting, center correlation setting attractions. Panel lines, stargates, line condition of 12. Direct modifications. Now going through line centers of 5,000 line air into 3 line, 4 line applications. Now we're going to allocate line conditions box frame that puts theta communication lines into 4 box lines, so location, triangulation, reset position programs. Direct modification lines of triangulation line conditions, point lines of tractions, box, triangle, triangle, box. Position lines of centers, allocate timeline centers, high interference of platforms. Direct modification lines, screen lines, all calculation to its system, and traffic calculations, point systems. Now, direct line calculation setting ground lines, film calculation lines into 2 lines of measure. That allocates position line centers of centimeters, positions over pi. 12 seconds over line condition height center, 7 line center location setting. Put a body frame line center, line condition setting to team line. 7,000 line air and rotation surface, puts them in line condition setting. 5,000 lines of 2 line tractions, 3 lines of travels, line condition of 2 over lines of pi. Puts lines of 7 billion line cycles of calculation line condition system and biometrics, biorhythms, and line conditions with rhythm patterns. Allocate team line, future adaptation sequence in line calculation setting. 5,000 lines of charges and location modification lines in real time and calculation of point centers attractions. All right. All right. So you got 40 minutes line center height interference. All right. That's 400 line settings per line per square per unit. Okay. So that's 4 trillion line centers of seconds in set locations. You'll be in space. All right. So directed modification line screens puts allocate position of time center. The line communication setting that's programmed sets line connecting system. All calculate and modify in a 24-line cycle in set location. That's where you are in attractions, right? All right, so all lines and signals in set locations, right? Solar flare, CL boost, and cross-line signals. You're good to go, right? So as that sets up, the define line screen line sets the 3 lines of provisions, 24 cycles and line conditions, right? Calculation of 24, set location of 24 lines of position of space and time through panels and track locations. Direct modification lines, 2 lines of 3 lines, high set location line system, and 6 set lines of 9 in position of 12. Okay, 3, 6, 9, and 12 set locations. All right, so we have a pyramid dying screen, line set location, line settings, and set locations. Balance lines, calculation, highest interference, line direct signal location, modification, line connections, tracks positional levels, all line signal, line connection system. Electrical line communication setting, and all track position, its operation surface, and track locations. All right. All right. So pi generation screens, high calculation lines, all of the program, and position of all calculations. Now, position lines of 3 lines of zeros. You got to get information ground settings and all calculations. All right. Now, getting line setting high interference has a class of calculation lines of center and communication setting and travel. Puts lines of travel lines in set positions calculations. Getting lines of modification screen lines and high center interference in set location. Right? So what this does in all line connection setting, it allocates your timeline sequence in your 12 lines of planets. 3 lines of positions, calculates line centers. 3 line connection settings, sets line connection high center interference of 10, sets lines of 13, take away line calculations setting of 12, and track locations. 1, 2, 3, and track locations. And habitation zones and line signals. Modificates the cycles, class calculation line interference, and cerebral cortex of the design. Center lines, of course, setting of track lines. Center position location XT1000s and 2 track location of provision. Center course and setting of track lines. Center position of 1, center position of 2, and center position of 3, and 4, and 5, and 6, and 7 set locations of theta calculation line screens. Direct modification cycles and high generation screen locations. The allocated line scripts, high center interference of security line position of panels, equalizes the set location lines of measure. Okay, lines high center interference and cells and modification screen lines and high adaptation lines to an energetic wall in set locations. Directing lines of modification puts all levels of channel. Position levels of high calculation lines at point centers of attractions. Directed modifications, now we go into the grid line screen. Direct lines of modification lines, 1 position of 3, 3 position of 4, 4 position of 5, 5 position of 6, and 7 set locations. Now the energetic line screen sets position location high centers. This is where comes in the elixir, line condition, and perceptions. Illumination graphs, purple frames, and track-based line system. Puts lines a line center high interference in position to its calculations. Direct modification line cycles, high calculation point lines attractions. Crop circles and design line centers and positions calculations. Point lines of high center interference position calculation. Got my equation. Complicated stuff, isn't it? So recognizing where you are is identifying everything of you are in line setting. It's all recognition of time sequence. So inline rotations, back and set line condition settings, box triangulation, calculation in Fibonacci line screen. So that's calculation of 5,000 line screen. Center communication of 24 equals lines of 4. That generates its calculation line centers, geometric, geographical, geological, and line condition of solar sail, and communication line screens and set positions calculation. All right. So directing lines of 5, change lines of 0, 0 to 3 track line conditions. Solar sails and track location line setting puts all levels in Fibonacci line screens and set position adaptation. Allocated line screen highest center interference, we take the 24 track, 24 lines of panels, and 24 lines of grounds. Diamond core line, shift line, box line rotation setting to theta. Sets lines of communication lines, energetic dome screens. Box line centers and travel position of point centers attractions. Now the point lines attracts the molecule design line. The atom line shift is correlation with track location of proton. Neutralizes courses and track lines in a 4-line measure and set location of scales and track locations. The allocated line screen and high center interference sets lines of communication lines in line rotations of center communications and high calculation. All right, that's my question. All right. So, really understand what's going on in line calculation setting and how it changes lines of perception at screen locations. All right, incredible, isn't it? Especially when you get to colors. All right, so the matrix line screen line has adaptation cycle. Now this sets lines of high center interference and of forcing course sending attractions. Directing lines of modification energetic graphs sets lines of box centers. Okay, 45-degree angle splits anomalies in a 4-track line provision. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in center locations. 7 correlating lines of 7, sets location of 7, set location of 7, and set location of 7. All right, track location line settings. Now, laser line communications into energetic wall screens in positional platforms and line connection splits anomalies in 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 case line connections of Earth, 4 case lines of space and tractions. Direct modification, X2000 comes a line signal. Correlates to track lines, platitudes of screen lines and high center interference. Point lines of divisions and platform communication and settings and track communications. Okay? Now, directing lines of communication line center interference, we allocate position of time center. 5,000 line screen, 3 lines of measure, and a 24 line of screen locations. Now this allocates your line condition setting, 7 billion line rotations, digital imaging, and line condition high centers, pi generation, screen location, and acceleration. Signature patterns, rotation spin cycles, signature line screen locations, and alpha, delta, and theta communication and graph calculations. Right? Done by equation. Okay, so metric meters and scales and balance position core directs modification your line cycles and high calculations. Point line divisions, guys, is where you understand your time factors. Now, is it a coincidence that there's 5 thumbs up and 7 line connections? No. So 7 lines equal lines of 5. Set location of 5 lines equal location of 7 in set locations, right? So measure the lines of binary and real line set location of center coordinates and lines of 1 and position of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 in locations in bracket calculation of binary codes. Sets lines of 7, sets lines of 6, sets lines of 4, sets lines of 2, set lines of 3, and set lines of 1 in track location. Energetic dome screens high calculation of the point system. Putting lines of correlate sending attractions, right? Face recognition time sequence and line settings and all levels of formations in position of travel lines and set locations in high calculation. All right? Mother Earth. All right, so she's in line setting now in line rotation. No more density and center interference. Her colossal communication line, screen lines, and high adaptation is now in center correlations of 0. Modification lines of screen lines, adaptation line cycles, high center interference, and calculation of galaxy lines. This is where the team comes in the shift lines communications, all line center interference of face recognition. Timeline sequence position of pi, guys. All right. All right, so the density line is gone. It's surface lines, triangulation, and reset position programs. Now we got plasma energetic wall screens, graph calculations, and fractals. Lacing lines into 3-track locations. Balance signals and on opposite lines, location lines at high calculations. Point lines of 4-track location of point line centers and center correlation settings of track positions calculation. Now directing modification lines of high center interference. Really understand how to formulate the line connections of all levels of 2 panels, 3, 4, position lines attractions, direct lines of modification settings. Opens all signals, opens up all channels, line connections, high formations, and travel position calculation. Now, directing lines of the sun sets lines of communication line condition setting. All right. So this is where it records the line connecting system. Track location line division, the eclipse and location. All right. Cross line screens, X2000 platitude line interference and position. Now, the track location lines has a laser line grid. Panels lines of 3 pi track locations. Direct lines of high centers, 1 position, 2 tracks, 3 lines, 4, 5, and 6, and 7 in positional calculation setting to travel. All right. All done through equation. All right. Energetic dome screens, setting lines of communications. All right. Directing modification lines, cross line signals. So we come into sonar interference in position attractions. That directs signal locations of pi. See the pi? Sets correlation lines in a high calculation setting of the solar sail and track location. All right. All done by equation. It's complicated, isn't it? Try to understand what's going on through all technology, right? All right, so we have the point line. This is where it comes into a new line set location, Newton's umbrella. See the umbrella? All right, so the course line set location puts allocate time screens, 5,000 line centers, position lines at 24 and travel locations, line position locations in a 4 o'clock system, and travel calculation of 4 box line centers, Athena line rotations, and center correlation and attraction. Done by equation. Complicated, right? Don't know what's going on. All right. How's everybody doing so far? Okay, so in that position line centers, we're going to allocate your position of time sequence. It puts all levels of 12 constellation paths and all line center interference. So separate coordinate trunk lines, high set locations into all lines of separation, communication, of rooms. In settings, all lines of high calculation with position of point centers. Puts all communication setting and track location to a system and track location. Okay? Now, you have to understand the point lines attractions. Now, this is where it comes into McCall, how it comes into structure, location, setting. You guys are coming into line set location, future application of now line that puts everything in real time as locations. Now, directing modification lines of cycles and generation screen locations. Habitation zones, crossing line signals pi. Okay? Transits line center high interference. Loss of communications and direct line locations. Positions of patterns, line setting high calculation line system and higher levels of traction. Okay, directing modifications of platforms, direct lines of 3 and 4 set locations, setting communication lines of 3 in set location, point lines of attractions in 0, 0, 0, 0, and 1 locations, direct modification line centers of 0, 0.0, 0.0, 0.0, 0.0 in set locations, direct modification lines of 0, set location of 0, set location of 1, set location of 0, set location of 0, set location of 1. Set location of 1, set location of 1, set location of 1. 4 panels, line rotation cycles, high calculation line screens, 2,000 line screen, 5,000 line setting, 7 line positions, and all calculation of 7 trillion line screens, adaptation line conditions, all levels set locations, and track locations of face recognition. Done by equation. All right. So, it's amazing how you do that to all formation locations through intelligence. Okay. Calculation modification line settings and travel. Okay? But look at that. Look how powerful that is. To know exactly what you're looking at in line setting and all positions travel and all communication of point lines of set location. Okay? Theta communication. Higher level lines of high count position location of travels. Direct line modification cycles with theta and alpha, delta, and line set locations at 3 track lines and all levels of Pluto in line condition setting and projection. Right? Directing line signals and high centers of travel and point lines of track settings and high calculations. Right? Getting you guys set up in position. All right. Yep. Yeah, that's totally fine, Danielle. Just connect with all lines in our high interference Monday and Wednesday, location and settings of travel. Remember, guys, questions can be asked in set locations. You don't want to ask questions when you're in position. Okay, because that sets off all lines of high interference, location of false calculations of travel, right? The only thing you'd be focused on is what's going on in your line condition setting, because you can cause a ripple effect and affect everything in line condition setting and team calculations, right? So you have questions or comments, you leave that after, okay? You have to understand what's going on in a line condition you're setting, how it all comes in adaptations and all track locations, all right? Especially if you're directing to general. Right? That's why we have Q&A. All right. So process course centered track lines. Now lines of location to 5,000 line screen. So lines at 24 track locations in a 48, 72, and 144. Sets communication line settings. That's out of 1 lines and 114 track location line settings. So that line's a set location of 1 million in position of 1 line second, 1 minute. Sets location of 4 line provisions, 400,000 line cycles, 3 lines of measures, 2 track locations and 1 set locations. X line centers of Y in position of XX, position locations into YX, correlation setting into DX, set locations in formula. Says correlation lines of E in track locations into 2 line rotations, center correlation and attractions. This is trigonometry. Set lines of high interference, trigonometry, and line settings, inline rotation, surface, and track location. Okay, done by equation. So putting lines of trigonometry, setting line geometry, line interference, or trigonometry is where you understand the calculation settings as triggers, direct modification lines of cycles. Chord lines, highest interference, and H in the E lines equals lines of calculation of 500 line settings. So in line connecting setting into 5,000 line channels and locations, 5 million line centers of surface and direction settings of 3 zeros and location, 1 million line rotations, trapplication of provisions, box line triangulation, triangulation box, locations in a box, triangulation line condition setting, triangulation line rotations, Fibonacci line centers, 3 weather line rotation cycles, satellite communication interference, and 4-point line traction, highest interference, 1 line divisions, operation cycles, 2 atom line conditions, and kaleidoscope communication teleportation. Right? Done my equation. Right? So I'm setting the scale lines of 500 line settings that puts all calculated 5,000 line error into 24 line cycles and trapplication system and part of accelerated line conditions. Right? Setting line condition settings, guys, you understand the trends. It's how it all lines its formation system and trap calculation line conditions. Right? All right. Graphing calculation screen lines. So getting your communication lines of surface is directing lines of communication. This point lines is tractions that puts all levels of calculation with point system. Lines of graph, lines of 1. Triangulation line condition size centers of 2. Point lines of size interference and track communication setting. And line rotation surface, row graph calculation of point line centers of high interference. Now, directing lines of modification, triangulation calculations, right? Modification lines, XT1000, 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 teleportation, screens, heights, interference, all calculated modified in a 4-track division. Direct lines of modification line screens, center correlation setting to track lines of 3 platforms communications. Direct modification lines set location at 3 line communication platforms. Direct lines of calculation lines center location at 6, and location at 8 line centers high interference, and teleportation screen locations. Runways and high calculation lines of portals, Stargate line rotation cycles open up generation screen lines and highest interference and trapplications of face recognition of plane sequence. That's my question. Right? Road mapping screen lines, highest interference in position constellations. Putting direct line signals into timelines and reactors. Now this verification system and all calculation modifications. This digitalize your imprints in line connection settings. Point lines of track location and plasma gender screen locations. Heart reactors and line centers equal lines to 12, sets line 24, sets lines of highest interference, 500 line settings, 5,000 line connection system, 5 channels communication settings, sets lines of communication of 5, 5, 5, direction of 3 panels, direct lines of 2, 2, 2 trapplications, 3 generations planes, screen lines of highest interference, and Saturn communications, and Pluto line rotations, and point lines of tractions, and 3 lines of measure, scales, balance, lines of triangulation line condition settings, molecule design lines of 1, molecule lines of 2, and molecule lines of 3, atom lines, wave line cycles, all line condition setting, colossal calculation line centers, a split lines anomaly, and trapplication of center and position of travel. Complicated, right? But done by equation. All right. Scaling balance, guys, on the line center location of 555 puts provision line cycles, 5,000 line screen, 5,000 line measure, okay, and 5,000 ground center locations. But lines of 24, 24, 24 in line conditions of past, present, and future adaptation cycles. It's all done by equation. All right, it's all set. Part accelerator is now in a split known as the 3-line communication of pi. This generates a screen location system, puts it all in calculation lines. So the team's now ready to get into 24 lines of waves of volunteers at the end of the month. Once they get their macro, everything comes in line condition with positions program. Sending lines of course line tractions, highest interference, 5,000 line settings, 5,000 set locations, and 5,000 ground locations. 24, 24, 24. Done by equation. All right. Very complicated how to set these things up in set locations, right? 10 lines of highest interference equals lines of 5. Okay, so it's recognizing communication line centers of 5 line settings, 5,000 line communications, and a 24 track line provision. Okay, so 2,400 set lines calculation in 3 lines. Pattern communication of 1, 2, and 3. Trapplications of pi, generation screen line splits and all is highest interference of 24. 24 lines of grounds and 24 lines of space. Position lines of patterns and line rotation, surface, and traction. Now, All that says lines and high calculation of point lines of tractions. Now we're in a 24 line rotation setting of track lines, 2,400 lines of clocking. So 2,000 platforms, 400,000 lines of measure. Setting correlates to lines of cerebral cortex lines settings in its applications of face recognition. Okay, done by equation. How's everybody feeling in tractions? Okay, so really understand we got 30 line screens, 30 line settings to high center interference. Measures on accountability is really understand the process, how this all works in application of travel lines, guys. Compute screen lines, high center interference, and your position location of channel. This here directs your signals and all calculation modification cycles. This regenerates your screen location adaptations. You have to know exactly how to use your technology now. Your perception has not changed. All right. All right, so when you get a 24 line screen, 24 calculation screen lines and 4 adaptation cycles in a 24 line position of time core, so that splits the nodes in equal line communication at 3 track location. Now, directing modification centers is understanding your ash projections. Okay, correlates the centers lines of high center interference of core projections. Right, direct lines of calculation line centers of space projections. Right, space deck. Direct modification lines of center lines of circle location center interference in follow location system and planet surface. Direct modification line calculation setting in position location of 2 panels and correlation setting attractions. Now, direct modification lines of 3-point line settings in position of force applications. Now, center correlation lines of track in 2 platforms. Center correlation lines center lines of 3 track locations. Now, directed modifications of pi sets lines of 24, 24, 24 in line position of center correlations of pi in center position of calculation. Done by equation. Okay, so the course line center interference and track applications by 2024. We're now in a 5,000 line screen in position of 24 line settings. So you're in a 2,400 line clocking. Past, present, and future is now in center correlations of balance in line position of pi calculation. Hoo-ah! Woo! Done by equation. All right. Spinning on cycles lies in high line center interference and positional programs, guys. Directing all modification length screen lines. Adaptation lines, new metric meters, new scales, calculation high system, center correlation calculation line setting, and to new tesseract and set design of face recognition. All right. All right, but it's interesting how you all come in position of track lines. This puts all communication settings into all communication settings of face recognition, doesn't it? Understand what's going on, especially when you're interlining in communication setting in all lines of all formation system in all track application setting in all communications in high centers and travel. Okay. Point lines of grass, face orientation time centers. That's all communication setting and travel position point system. So the 24 clocking now is 2,000 line error. 2,000 line clockings. That point lines and cerebral location line conditions. So we have 3 weather line rotations, track application of Fibonacci line settings, percentage over recorded setting track lines, and question mark communication of point systems. Now direct lines have 2 panels, matrix screen lines of high adaptation cycles. Now the 24 line screen sets 1 position of 3, position of 4, 5, 6, and 7 applications. Now, directed lines modification line setting sets a colossal calculation line system of Vega. Vega comes in all formation line conditions of face recognition. Settings corresponding line and positional levels. The correlation in the track lines sets line communication setting to a flux capacitor and channel. Direct modification lines of screen lines and high center interference and 2 question marks and applications. Direct modification lines of cycles, high coordinate line track lines, high center interference, and positional location of the program. Direct lines and modification lines of new cycles, new correlations setting of track lines in provisions and applications. Now, direct and modification line cycles, but center line communication centers in track application setting in cerebral application. Platforms communication lines of pi generation line settings and 4 line rotation centers in 5,000 communication of air. Direct modification line cycles, high interference of the sun, solar sails, and track application line centers of yin and yang. Process communication of balance applications. Done by equation. All right. How's everybody feeling so far? trying to understand what's going on, right? It's very complicated. Formula equation is just outrageous. Okay? It's outrageous of what's going on with you and how this is all set up and all position locations and setting. Okay? All right, so as you guys get in line signals of balance, your position of track line setters in line condition your plasma screens and calculation lines of pixelation lines, certification of spacing lines, plus our calculation line centers of 2,000, 400 line rotations and 3 lines of measures into 1, 2, 3 and track lines, equals lines, 12 line signings, 24 clockings, misallocations, right? Direct lines of panels, pyramid line rotations, splits and arms in a new line of position of course, trapplication line center of the tetrahedron. Balance position line centers, pixelation graph calculation of 3 lines, pi and generation screens. Now point lines attractions, 1x,000 platitudes, 1, 2, 3, and colossal course setting trunk lines in high setting. Position lines of 3 line rotation surface, allocates timeline system. Line setting a high line rotation surface and application of balance. Now direct lines of highest interference, perceptions over line centers is team, verification algorithm, line centers high interference, 1,000 line settings equals lines of 5,000 location of error. Application of 24, 24, 24, 24. 4 clocking system in line settings. So this puts you in a 2 million line error of clocking system. It's application of 400,000 line screens into applications. Direct lines modification cycles. Done my equation. All right, so we're done. Well, that's it. All right, I had to do this very fast in settings because it's all done through structural location system. All right, so you're all set up. All right, so we're going to take you out in 3 line minutes in position of travels. So put you in track and position locations, back in setting. Back in setting now, so you're in a 5,000 line error, 3 lines of attractions in 1, 2, and 3. Equals lines in a 12 line position of zone, 12 line signals, 12 modifications, 12 line divisions, and 12 center communication of planets, and direct modifications into line centers of box, equals lines of triangulation. Triangulation, line condition is box, box locations, so location of box, and triangulation. Point lines of attraction, high setting. All right? So it's all set up. We're all in platform and communication line screens now. In line centers and digital framing, line condition setting, Argo location system, setting line condition setting, solar sail. Okay? Setting track lines, high center interference of 1, 2, and 3 set locations. Okay? Position lines of 4, 5, 6, and 7 line condition. Okay? Direct modification lines of center, inline center interference, intra-applications, indirect line condition system of 5,000 error and 24 clocking net setting. Done by equation. Okay? We're done. That's it. Cycle interference is now in travel. Okay, take out equations, get in line center high interference and information screens. Okay, now position locations, 3 lines of attractions, hypervisions. Line setting, okay, waiting on signals, 38 line settings, high interference. Wait on line rotation surface. Once it gets in this location system of 40, channels line centers of 5,000 line settings, 3 lines of measures, 4 lines of tracks, 7 billion line centers high interference, 7 trails in line condition system, 7 line settings high interference, 7777 in the colossal, galaxy line shift line in point lines attractions of northwest, south, and east in line rotation surface and track locations. All right, so just less than a minute line screen. Setting lines of high center interference and position of its program set location and its calculation. So 17 triangulation line screens, 39 line rotations, 9 line divisions, 6 lines of provision, 6 line correlation. Let's go into 30 line rotation surface, intra-applications, 30 line settings in space, earth line, calculations in atmosphere line, space line. 3 track provisions, 30 line centers, high calculation lines of containment, 39 rotation surface, track applications, 39 rotation centers of clocking, direct lines and high center interference, 50 communication lines, seconds on the dial, hours, minutes on the seconds, set location center and travels, and back. Done through equation. 40 coordinates and sending track lines, point lines of 0, 1. Right on the dot in sublocations. Right? All right. That's it. We're done. So you guys have a lot of questions. I know that. But we're done. So 10 line centers of 5. What is that in positions of? 1.5. Okay? That's where you are in ground line centers now. 1,000,000.5 line center locations, 500,000 line screens. Puts all provision line cycles in your system locations at that patient surface. Okay? Adios.